we have a fourth guest coming, so she will arrive in the middle. She's a bit late, had some issues. But very inspired. I think this is actually a panel to bring us a little bit of inspiration. Everyone here has really creative stories to tell and very interesting ways to approach journalism in this changing world, in this changing field. I wanted to start a little bit with a couple of data, because I think it's important to set us. We know, and we've spoke about in the last couple of days about how news consumption continues to fragment. Welcome, Denica. And a Reuters Institute found that more than 80% of people don't identify, and this is global-wide, with news website as their primary source of information. Also by Reuters, 37% feels worn out about the amount of news and the overwhelming amount of information we receive every day. 37% of Americans, Gen Z, and it's similar number, it goes between 20 and 37 from different audiences segments, gets their news from influencers or from content creators in social media. And it's not about just media data. In a recent research from OECD, 31 countries had literacy decline, not media literacy, but literacy decline. So I think we have a lot of challenges, and we have data in front of us that we cannot deny that the journalism field needs a couple of changes. And I think being a little bit less stubborn, of saying this is what we do, this is the way we do, and hear the audience and see and adapt to a couple of transformations that we are seeing the way people consume information. At the Pulitzer Center, more or less 4 years ago when I arrived, we had this model of providing support for journalists to tell untold stories. But we are hearing more and more from the outlets the crisis, how hard it was, the challenges they were having to reach the audiences they want to reach. So they were there producing amazing stories. We supported about 500 stories and journalists a year, but not all of them were having a reasonable distribution. They were not being able to reach the audiences that needed to read that story. So that forced us to revise the model and think, what were we doing and how do we help the journalists that we are supporting? I wanted to start this panel, and I think it's very related to the stories that are going to be shared. I think 5 key approaches that we understand that we needed to change or we needed to think about in a new model, and we do have a new framework for journalism at the Pulitzer Center now. One of them is audience. It's to hear the audience, and also one thing that we find that journalists have feel very challenged to do is to pick one audience. We hear often and often, we want to reach everybody. I want everybody to read my story. So prioritization is really hard, but it's what people need to do. We need to understand who are the right readers, who really need to read my story, so it makes a difference. The second one is a more horizontal approach. So how do we go from a passive consumption of information to also providing spaces for critical thinking, where the audience can collaborate and we can discuss and can understand and can ask difficult questions for the stories that they are reading. The third one is less assumption. I think we also saw a lot of journalists that understand or that feels that they know what the story needs to be told. And sometimes when we start hearing the audiences, it's not the data that they are needing. They are needing tools, or they are needing information on what to do. And we saw this happening over and over. So bridging this gap between what the audience wants and what we really need. And I think finally, the last two and very important for us is one, impact. Being very intentional about impact. What do I expect my story to do? What is the biggest impact I could achieve? And what are the strategies I can build around it? And the last one is translation, and that's how I'm going to start the questions. How do we translate stories? If before it was about writing or videos or photos, you will hear today from this amazing panelist many other ways of translating stories, many other ways, what I normally say, non-commodified journalism, where we jump to one story to the other, and until we don't have space to process the amount of information. But if this one information is still valid, this one story is still valid after 1, 2, 3 years, we can't keep translated into video games, into call to actions, into many products. And I will start with you. Ivor Price is the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Food for Mzansi. And I wanted to ask you if you could share a little bit more, how have you been listening to your audiences, and how has that changed the model of your outlet?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I prepared a little deck. Maybe if the technical team could put it on screen. But Food for Mzansi started as a storytelling experiment in South Africa. Mzansi simply means South Africa, and it's an agricultural news publication at heart, digital only, and we co-create what we believe is the new face of South African agriculture. Usually the first thing people tell me when they hear click, click, when they hear that we are doing agricultural news, they think it's just about farming. It's all about artificial insemination and proteins and feed. Our publication is not about that. It's about politics, economics, climate change, finance. It's a serious, hardcore news publication with a newsroom at heart. So we started as a storytelling experiment in South Africa, and we gave visibility to people who were left out of the mainstream narratives. The people we write about in our publication hasn't been featured in any South African media for about 115, 116 years until we came about in November 2018. So these people have never been featured in mainstream media. I've got a background in mainstream media, so I was complicit in leaving these people out of storytelling. I remember when I worked for corporate, they said they're too poor. Advertisers won't be interested in this audience. There's no purpose in profiling them. So our audience are smallholder farmers right up to what we call newly commercializing farmers. They're agricultural workers, agricultural entrepreneurs. In South Africa, farming is right in the middle of our painful past, but also our exciting future. It's a really, really big deal, and we're busy with data development at the moment, and the research shows that once a year we touch about 70% of everybody that works in agriculture in our country. Everything we build starts with one question: what do our users need to thrive? And on the screen you'll see 2 of what we call our audience avatars. We've got 5 in total, but these are the 2 that bring the bacon home. Sipho, at the bottom, is responsible for 90% of our revenue, even though we have 5 different audience avatars. This is quite special. It's based on Dimitri Shishkin's user needs model, and I know Khalil is also a big expert on that. I'm sure you'll talk about it. But what it means in practice, at 8 a.m. every morning when our journos pitch stories, it's not just good enough to pitch a story for the day to your news editor. You have to say which of the 5 avatars you're pitching it to, and why are you doing it? Is it inform me? Is it inspire me? Whatever that may be. It also means when our social media person writes an Instagram post, or when my sales colleagues do a business proposal, they go through the same exercise. When we started out, we were too broad. We tried to serve everyone. Now we've narrowed it down to 5, but primarily these 2 avatars. And that ensures that we remain relevant, impactful, and trusted by those we serve. And for us, innovation is not just about the tech. It's about building relevance and connection. So how do we do it? What is our approach to innovation, to data, to trust, to future? We believe that when you truly understand your audience, like we think we do, and just when we think we've figured them out, there's a new thing that we have to figure out, we can innovate with purpose. We build products that our users actually support. And for us, trust translates to both impact and income. It's how we sustain, hopefully, meaningful journalism, by being in tune with our audience. And we do feedback loops at all our events. We've got about 19 events, WhatsApp groups, newsletter guides, and our audience intelligence that we gather at these touch points. It helps us to personalize content and formats. It refines our tone, our timing, our storytelling every single day. It measures our impact. It's really difficult to measure impact for us. And it helps us to generate revenue because the products we build are informed by our audience and our partnerships and events. We use a simple formula. We're all about empathy, data, innovation, and if you add that together, we believe it will lead to sustainable news products. We build communities, not just audiences. You know, audience has become a bit of a buzzword in media, but it's actually all about serving the audience and building a community that matters. So, you know, these aren't just events that we do. Go back. Anyway, we do a series of 3 different events, of 19 events, but I want to highlight just 2 for the purpose of this conversation. One is the Mzansi Young Farmers in Daba. It's a Young Farmers in Daba. Next year, we're having our 5th iteration of this event. It draws 2,000 people that come from 12 different countries. And we're a digital-only product, audience. It's a blend of inspiration, learning, live data collection, and farmers' needs and challenges. And often, even at these events, we listen to our audience and pivot. And lastly, the event we started this year, it's a transformational conference. We call it the Agricultural Transformation. The Khotla Transformation, DEI, as Trump would say, is really big in South Africa. It's a dialogue on transformation, inclusivity, and leadership. And it helps generate insights that we then feed back into our newsroom and our business development team. And maybe I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to get the link about building communities and call Denica. She's the communications editor of IRL. And you brought, we discussed it before, and she shared very, very interesting examples, how you have beyond serving the passive consumptions of news, but also hearing your audience feelings about those news and how they were reacting to the results of the investigation. And you did a couple of call to actions with the community you've been building, with the audience you've been building, and one of them, such as the guerrilla campaigns. Could you share a little bit more?
So basically communication at IRL is not like a side function, but it's central to our mission. We treat every investigation that we publish as a campaign, especially the investigative documentaries, which we'll speak later about. So we realized that after publishing a big investigation, people would get so frustrated and nervous and angry that we were afraid that they would cause some violent riots or something like that. So we wanted to give them a more democratic way in which they can channel their energy. And we started doing the calls for action. Usually, after an investigation, we would target what is the main issue, and we would ask citizens to demand accountability or to demand change. It's always different. Sometimes they should write to a member of parliament. That was our last call for action. There was a fire in Macedonia, I'm sure you're all aware of, in Kočani. 63 people died in a disco club. We asked citizens to write to members of parliament, and 5,000 people responded to the call for action. They were demanding that members of parliament would initiate urgent hearing so that we can find out why this fire actually happened. We make these things very easy for them because we are well aware of that they're very busy and overwhelmed by everything that's going on social media. So basically we made a form when they can easily apply. They just had to write their email and click send, and the emails were automatically sent to all members of parliament. Sometimes we would have call for action for whistleblowers from inside of institutions because we need whistleblowers to continue with our investigations. Sometimes they would demand a change in legislation. And these call for actions, because they're usually short videos and reels, they always go viral. And the main thing is that they bring back visibility to our investigations. Because if sometimes there's a chance that a person will see the call for action, but they wouldn't know about the investigation. But they see that everyone is sharing it, that everyone is talking about it, so they want to get in on it, so they would watch the investigation. So the main goal is to make them feel like they can act and to demand change and accountability, but also bring back reach and views to the main investigation.
Thank you. And Paul, that connects with the question I wanted to ask you, because you have been translating the reporting into very interesting ways, but also for massive audiences as video gaming and movies and the cinema industry, documentaries. How do we ensure, if you could share, of course, a little bit of the experience, but also tell us, how do you ensure that these audiences stays connected with the issue that you were originally reporting to?
So, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel, and these are amazing initiatives that we heard about already. And I'd just like to start with two questions for the audience, if I may. And please, a show of hands. Can you raise your hand if you believe that we sufficiently serve the public right now? Just show your hand if you believe we sufficiently serve the public right now. Don't be shy. One person, okay. Do you believe, and please raise your hand, that we have ever sufficiently served the public? One hand over there. So this is kind of a consensus here, right? I mean, there's a couple of people who believe that we do and we did. And I'm glad we have this consensus, because in my opinion, we don't serve the public in an efficient way at all. Not in the past, not now. So this is where we, and I'm kind of angered, and I heard on this stage this as well, that we kind of help to survive, that we have to keep the status quo, that we have to, that we have the laws in place that we need, and so on and so on. This angers me, because what we need, in my opinion, is to better serve the public, to better connect with the audiences, to understand those farmers, to understand those people in those locations, in this and that country. So we have to do a lot more to get there, to get to that point where we really serve, the people. And this is where we need to change our way of thinking from surviving to actually making a huge leap towards something new, where we see the seeds of that already, I think. We see the infrastructure of that being built slowly. But to get there, we have to change our way of controlling things. We have to cease, to give up control to a great extent, because if we don't give up control, if we don't trust our audiences, if we don't engage with our audiences, not just in the sense that we want eyeballs for our products, but in the sense that the audiences participate in our processes, then we will lose it all. So this is, I believe, where, we come in as innovators in investigative reporting, in journalism in general, and there's just three things that I want to mention in this context. And one is, in order to be able to do this, and this was the panel before us, you have to build this infrastructure, these alternatives, to what is available right now. So it was mentioned a bit here, the Journalist Cloud Alliance, where we try to create this infrastructure, to be able to compute large amounts of data, which is not possible right now. No journalistic organization on earth at this moment in time, if you receive a leak that's a half petabyte of information, you'll not be able to process that. Nobody can. So we have to solve that. Nobody can really experiment with anything at this moment. We can't experiment even with our own LLMs. I mean, we have to, to stitch things together, to use a little bit of ChatGPT, a little bit of Gemini, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We can't really do things for ourselves. Now, if we manage to ensure some of this infrastructure, and this is not about replacing big tech, because that's not possible. I mean, if you pit the developers that work with us, against the developers that work for big tech, for big salaries, you can't match that. But certain parts of the process we can, take over. We can actually distribute. We can, participate. So there are things that we can do in a very, very down-to-earth kind of way. So once we have that infrastructure, once we understand that we also sit on a gold mine. I mean, all the investigative work that has been done in the past 20 years since the advent of collaborative investigative reporting, all these transnational collaborations, this is a lot of IP. And that IP can make us a lot of money to be able to build the infrastructure that we need to ensure our future. So this is where, for instance, with my organization, together with the Gabo Foundation in Cartagena, together with many others, we are building these pipelines between investigative reporting IP and fiction film production and video game production. But these have to be massive pipelines to make sure that you generate enough revenue to sustain the other activities, the experimentation that needs to take place within investigative reporting, within journalism in general. So this is what we're working on. We created a project called Floodlight, where we connect investigative reporting to filmmakers. This effort is in the third year. We work with film producers like the people who've done The Wolf of Wall Street, or Ozark, or The Americans, or She Said, and so on and so on. And we have a similar project right now with the Veronica Foundation and with others, where we connect game developers, and we organize these game jams between investigative reporters and the game developing industry. And the idea is to be able to get to more public through these new avenues, to disseminate your information, your knowledge, and to kind of tap into this published and unpublished IP. Because let's face it, I mean, we are gathering, we're like hoarders, we're like gathering so much information that we never use, in our reporting, that we never present to the public for various reasons: space constraints, time constraints, legal constraints. All of this, is IP that can be used to generate other products that can make us money to take that leap. And I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. And I left Khalil at last on purpose because the others shared examples, and Khalil is a consultant helping outlets to bridge that gap. I think I have a guiding question. Is what is that you are seeing that the media outlets believe? What is the biggest gap between what the media outlet believes and what the audience needs? And how can we make to bridge that gap?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I agree with everything that you said, Paul, and Ivor and Denica as well. If I can just get I've got a couple of slides that I want to show you, no problem. And what is really interesting, I think, from all of the examples that we've just heard, is underpinning all of those is the need to be valuable to audiences, the need to be valuable to people. And I take your point that audiences has become a bit of a hip word. 10 years ago, no one talked about audiences. Those of us in the audience field 10 years ago, we had to consistently repeat that we need to actually listen to people. We need to connect with people. I feel like we've won that now. So what's the next step? Really, I think creating value to people. And if I can get the slide with the black background, I think that will help explain it. Not this one, maybe the other one. There we go. I think I can go one back. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. So how many of you have seen this? A few of you, yeah. So this is how popular this model has become. So this is the user needs model. And the entire reason why it exists is to give newsrooms a bit of a framework to create value for audiences. So, you talked about being valuable to a specific segment. Denica talked about getting people to write to their MPs, right? Take action. So what this model basically shows is that there are 4 major categories of needs when it comes to people, when it comes to news content or content in general. This was based on a research done by the BBC World Service nearly a decade ago now, with their audiences all over the world. And what they found was that irrespective of where people are around the world, irrespective of age, gender, etc., there are commonalities in terms of needs. People want to know what's happening. People want to understand what's happening. People want to feel something about what's happening, and people want to do something about what's happening. So those are things that I think many of us sort of know maybe intuitively, if not directly. But I think just having something written down, or look at something, it kind of makes more sense. And this is very important because when we're valuable to people, that's when we create that connection with people. That emotional connection is very important. That emotional connection allows people to see the value, allows people to see the quality of the journalism that we're doing, allows people to sort of, rebuild that trust. Underpinning that sort of a virtuous cycle is user needs. It is being valuable to audiences. And, many of you have seen this model. It works. One of the things that we see when we work with newsrooms that are maybe at the beginning of that process of implementing user needs is more or less this graph, right? This graph basically shows the amount of content that we publish that serves different needs. And what you can see is the update me need. So that's your breaking news stories usually. We produce quite a lot of content that serves those needs. But look at connect me, divert me, inspire me, or help me. Connect me is basically the need to feel connected to your community. Help me do something for my community. Divert me is pretty straightforward. Inspire me as well. Help me, your guides, etc. We don't produce that much content on that, serving those needs. But this is what the audience priorities are. The green line is just your KPI. It could be your reach KPI, it could be your engagement KPI, it could be your conversions KPI. See the mismatch. People, the audiences, are very clearly telling us that their need are connect me, inspire me, etc. Those need to feel, those need to do something. There is a massive gap between the content production and the needs of people. Bridging that gap equals creating more value for audiences. Everything else falls into place from this. This is the foundation. All the monetization that you talked about is effectively based on this. That's the foundation, that what we need to thrive for and try to achieve going forward.
And in the field of journalism, education, or long-term impact fields, it's hard sometimes to measure impact because it's different from when a funder normally asks result. It's different from building houses that you can give numbers, or you can give how many people have your project fed or built resilience. The journalism, we not necessarily know which of the reportings is going to lead to a big societal change. So I think there's a challenge on how do we measure impact that also goes beyond clicks and subscriptions or online measures, quantitative measures. Not that they are not impact, they are, but how do we measure, for example, an aha moment from a student that it's reading your Inspiring Me reporting? Ivor, I wanted to leave that difficult question with you. How have you been measuring impact in Mzansi?
Measuring impact is not something, to be honest, at 2018 when we started out, we didn't even think about measuring impact. And then some of our advertisers insisted on more useful data to the point where everything we do now gets measured in different ways. We listen closely to our audience. Something we've started experimenting with about 3 months ago is surveys and polls. So you read our website, which is our primary source of information, and often there would be a pop-up asking a simple question that gathers all sorts of data. We now have a WhatsApp group. I know we were fairly late to the WhatsApp party, but WhatsApp is incredibly important in South Africa. I know in the European context, people still text. We don't do that back home. It's for spam messages and bank messages, notifications. But we use the WhatsApp group to gather data. Social media, our audience is highly engaging, and it gathers from LinkedIn, which we're seeing exploding at the moment, to all the usual suspects, and then the in-person events. Right after COVID, we had our first in-person event, and it sold out within 3 days to the point where we now gather people from 12 different countries. And then initially we were like, oh my God, what are we going to do with all these people? It's one thing to put up a program and the journalists write their stories, but what data are we gathering? How are we listening to what they're saying to do better business, but to serve our audience better? This feedback helps us understand their challenges, their pain points, their interests, the needs of our farmers and the agripreneurs, the policymakers who read our publications. And quite frankly, it helps us in the business development process as well. You know, we found that when we listen carefully, we can develop events or products that generate substantial amounts of revenues, like the Mzansi young farmers in Daba I showed you. It guides the editorial team in the topics we cover. You know, we can see, based on the needs, what people are interested in and whatnot. It guides the formats we decide to use or not, how we communicate, how we talk to our audience, and also the concepts and strategies we devise to make money. For example, the questions and insights from this Young Farmers event that I keep on referencing, it directly influences our newsletters, our podcast, our event content strategies. And then lastly, the audience input, it helps us to create targeted opportunities for advertisers, you know, bespoke opportunities that you can't easily find on a rate card. I think that's what we excel at as a business. And ultimately, it helps to make our products more relevant and valuable for our audience. You know, our audience as young farmers, they're hungry for a few things. One is access to land, which is hugely problematic in South Africa. Most of the farmers we serve do not own land. They're in long-term leases with the state, up to 99 years. So we know that that's one of the things they do. And also, because of who they are, many of our partners want to connect with them for funding opportunities. Often when we write about these people, a day or so later, we've got calls from government, public enterprises who want to do business with them. Mm-hmm. So we serve them, and it leads to opportunities for them too.
Wonderful. And one of the things we have been doing at the Pulitzer Center is listening to the audiences and audience research. And we had this curious case where we were developing a strategy to reach and engage youth in the Amazon countries with our rainforesting-supported reporting. And we had this assumption, again, that what was missing was information. And then when we were interviewing students, university students in these countries, we heard, oh no, we know what's happening. We even know the name of the people that are burning the forest. What we need it too. Like, what do I do? Does my voice matter? Does I have a role to play? So we know there is a big difference between awareness and engagement and action. And Paul, I wanted to ask you, how do you bridge that gap between making sure that the way you are translating the reporting are also giving tools for the people that want you to do something about the investigations you're carrying?
Yeah, that's a critical thing to do, I believe, because, I mean, you know, at my organization, we actually quantify impact in numbers. Like we have, you know, since 2017, we contributed to the recovery of about $12 billion from various bad parties, corrupt organizations, you know, organized crime, corrupt politicians, and so on and so on. And I would say I'm very proud of that, right? Because the ROI on that is like between 30,000% to 50,000%. It's better than cocaine trafficking. So investigative reporting, you know, pays off. And I could stop there by saying, wow, we're such a great organization, we're doing all this. But the reality is that there's about $3 trillion in crime every year. And we've investigated and we contributed to the recovery of 12 billion over the past 18 years. So you see what's the difference there. So I'm not happy with our work. I'm very proud of the courage of our people. I'm very happy, you know, with what we managed to achieve. But I know, you know, that there's a lot more that needs to be done. And that's through the engagement with the people. This is where, for instance, what we're working right now on is we've developed all these strategies. We know how to investigate everything. Like right now, we can start an investigation, and all the member centers can start an investigation from this table here. You take the table, you look at it, and you start investigating the supply chain. What's behind it? You know, who's behind it? Is there corruption? Is there human trafficking behind it? But at the end of the day, we have the strategies, but we don't have the numbers. So, in my opinion, What we have to do as investor reporting centers is to position ourselves, to see our shortcomings, and to position ourselves as R&D centers that can feed into a greater population these strategies, these techniques, these tools, this infrastructure. So we took numerous steps towards that, and I was very happy to hear about Corrective and their steps, to engage with the public and others, What we're doing, for instance, with the Syros Foundation. The Syros Foundation is the foundation that created the YubiKeys. Perhaps some of you are familiar with this technology, the secure technology to secure your, Gmail account and so on and so on. So with the Syros Foundation, we're piloting this year what is called a digital press pass, which is a way for people and journalists and activists and everybody else, to participate in investigative processes based on the principle of verified anonymity and based on the open ID technology. So this is going to change things, in my view, because you need the numbers. You need the numbers, and you need to have people engage with you in a way that is safe for them. You have to be able to allow people to do things on their own, because people are going to be more creative than we are. We can plant the seed, we can show the strategies that we used, the articles that we published, but those should just be the beginning of what the public can do with that information. So we need to widen this space, and in order to engage with the public, you have to provide the infrastructure, the inspiration for people to become investigators. So I think the best metrics when it comes to investigative reporting will be how many people became investigators as a result of the interaction with your work.
Denica, I think that's a good hook for your work. And I wanted also to talk about the challenge of involving building communities and involving audiences and actively listening to the audiences. What is the main challenge that you face, and what have you learned?
The main
what have you learned?
When we first started, especially because our focus is young people, we realized that we're not competing with traditional media. We're not competing with mainstream media and newsrooms. We're basically competing with streaming platforms such as Netflix and HBO, and also with these flashy content creators. So that's how we decided that we're going to start doing the newsroom, the investigative documentary series. I will explain it briefly, and then we can watch. It's like a 1-minute teaser. So basically, we teamed up with young, ambitious and professional filmmakers who wanted to do filmmaking, but in the public interest. And what is new about the newsroom and what is different, for example, than true crime documentaries, is that we don't dwell on past events, but we follow the journalists as protagonists while they uncover the truth. And the another innovative part is that we use the 5-act film structure, which is mostly used in fiction film, especially in thrillers, so that we can build anticipation. And I think now it's a good time to... Just a second. Oh, oops.
По моите 30 години има многу работи видено, го нема видено, значи толку жртви на едно место.
Ja go vikam ubistvo zato što nekoj umisleno ne gradil kako što treba и не го спровел законот.
Вонредни вести на македонската телевизија. Вечерва избувна голем пожар во модуларната болница во Тетово.
Семејствата надвор гледаа како нивните роднини горат внатре на плюс 800 степени.
Болницата изгоре премногу брзо.
Значи сакаме да видиме како е направена болницата, што сме излежал тој тендер.
За ваква трагедија. Ја по-чудно обвинение на полна страна немам прочитано. Да се случи нешто што е вистинска реткост во кариерата на еден новинар.
Конечно ги имавме сите вештачења. Сега веќе имавме точно увид што се случило таму.
Sorry. They're not watching it. We're the only ones watching.
Oh, are we?
We were watching here, didn't see. It's not synchronized.
And we were very concentrated on the screen.
I was actually sure,
It was very interesting.
So, sorry, before starting, let me just give a brief explanation. There was a fire during COVID in a modular COVID hospital, and 14 people burned alive, most of them immobile and sick. And basically, the prosecutors, they constructed a case hiding the real perpetrators of the fire. And that is why 1 year later, we started investigating into the fire, and now you'll watch the teaser.
Yeah, the first part showed.
All right.
Okay.
So,
Okay. However you want, I don't know. One video, 1,000 words. That's why we wanted to play it, because we wanted to show that this is not just about the information, it's about giving people quality information in a way that they can consume it, especially young people. Because we realize that it's not that young people aren't interested, but they can't follow news reports anymore. I mean, we have to give them something that they can digest, whether it's through social media, whether it's like this, and that's why we treat these investigations also as campaigns. It's not just the call for actions. Before publishing a documentary like this, we do a guerrilla action. This is typical for marketing, and it's not typical for journalism. It kind of blurs the line between journalism and activism, but we believe in that in desperate times such as this is the future of journalism. So what is a guerrilla? Guerrilla is an installation in real life. For example, for this case, we took 14 t-shirts and we burned them and we hanged them in front of the prosecution building. These are the t-shirts. And again, it's not about those 100 people that will pass by the scene on the day, but we also created content for social media so that the whole country can see it. We hired a professional photographer, we did a short reel, and so everything we do is in order to help our investigations reach as much people as they can. And I have to say that the documentaries are the most popular media product in North Macedonia. One of our documentaries was watched for more than 1 million people, and we're less than 2 million in the whole country. Our last video about the Kočani fire in only 2 weeks had almost 1 million views. So they're a very popular product because people connect with the documentaries, and it's interesting that we all mentioned empathy as a key principle of attending to users' needs. Basically because we target young people, we put ourselves in their shoes, and we knew what is that they're asking from us. That it's not just a story. I mean, we can have the best investigation, we can spend 8 months investigating, and then we publish a story, and we expect young people to read 10 pages. I mean, it's never gonna happen. So that's why we started innovating and doing all of these products. Like, that's why I said communication, it's not a side function, but we don't have just a social media person, we have a whole communication and engagement team, and the team works with journalists from day one. Since they start investigating the story, we collaborate and work together. So we know what the story is, we know what's the impact that we want to achieve, we know what we should give the people, how we should present it. We do guerrillas, we do, I don't know, sometimes we get judged, especially by seniors in North Macedonia. This is not journalism, you don't know how it's done. And then they publish a story and they have 10 people read it, and okay.
Thank you, Denica. And I think your phrase that we don't have a social media specialist, we have a whole team thinking. It's a big structural change that we know we need to see in many outlets. And I'll turn to you. What are the key process flows that working with these outlets and advising them in terms of listening to the user needs? What are the big process changes that you saw as needed?
Yeah, I'll try to touch on what everyone has said, because I think what is really important and what is quite interesting is the difficulty in measuring impact is something that we hear over and over again. But it's less difficult for some newsrooms compared to others. And there are commonalities between those newsrooms that find it less difficult to measure impact. Some of those commonalities are they have clarity about their audiences, and they set out to achieve something. It is journalism in service of doing something. This is not, in my experience, this is not the default position of many media organizations. So if you're doing journalism without a specific objective, of course it's difficult to measure impact, because what is impact? It's nebulous. But when you're setting out to achieve something with an objective, suddenly it becomes less difficult, let's say, to measure impact. So I think that's very important. And it's interesting what you said, which is activism and journalism, but when basically, I'm paraphrasing, shit hits the fan, there is no difference then between activism and journalism. Again, the difference between the supposed difference, activism and journalism, does not exist in many parts of the world. Many journalists in many parts of the world do not see a difference between activism and journalism. People go into journalism to create change. People go into journalism to defend causes, to defend things to help people, to help maybe their families. People are going to die if they don't do things. There is no difference between activism and journalism for those people. So it's interesting that we have always sort of have those conversations with newsrooms in certain parts of the world. That is not representative of the many experiences of elsewhere. Of course, that is not to say that journalism, explanatory journalism, etc., is not important. I'm not saying this. We are in an ecosystem. We need to respect that activism journalism has its place, explanatory journalism has its place, etc., etc. So that's a point that I think is quite important to grasp and understand, and that brings me to the empathy thing. Empathy is really important and is foundational to everything that we do. So when you talk about, what are the sort of changes and processes that we see happen within newsrooms, yes, we can talk about the day-to-day work changes. We try to build more collaborative teams within newsrooms, cross-collaboration, so that we have a diversity of expertise within newsrooms, and that leads to what Denica was saying. The marketing team is part of the process from the beginning. Investigations, people are part of the process from the beginning, etc., etc. At the core of it, it's empathy. We need to have empathy for people because this is, we want to do something positive for people, and we have to have empathy within people within our newsrooms as well. Journalism is one of the most hierarchical industries ever. It is so hierarchical. How can an industry, which is so hierarchical, right, where the power differential between those at the top and everyone else is so big, how can such an industry then pretend and say that, oh, we want a safer community, we want a better world? It's cognitive dissonance. We need to get our act together in the newsroom, be more collaborative. Younger people need to have a bigger voice, and they will, because the expertise that younger people have now are increasingly important, more important than maybe used to. Younger people are bringing new expertise that the previous generation or more experienced people don't have. The experience of the people who've been there for a long time is also obviously important, but we need to work together. There needs to be less, we need to become more horizontal within the newsrooms. Once we become more horizontal, then we can actually create a more horizontal society, which is the aim. User needs is a way to achieve that. There are other ways as well. Change-centric journalism is one way. There are so many different ways, but ultimately it's the empathy within the newsroom, within our colleagues, and it's the empathy of the newsroom with everyone else if we want to achieve change.
Thank you. I wanted to take a round of questions. I think we'll have time for one round of questions, maybe 3, 2. One there.
Hi, a question for Ivor around events. They're growing in popularity, which is good, I think, but there's a challenge around data points. How do you actually manage to capture all the information and the feedback that you get in a live event? Registration, maybe it's a way, but there are so many other ways, but how are you doing that?
We begin as, okay.
Can I get let's get 3 questions and then we come back to the answers. We have one here as well.
Hi, thank you so much for all your insightful presentations and all the work that you are doing. My question was for Denica. After you did the documentary and the guerrilla marketing, which I thought was so brilliant, and as journalists, we don't think of things as campaigns. And so for me, that was very revelatory that you think of an investigation as a campaign. At the aftermath of something so horrific as this sort of fire that led for you to investigate, what was the action you saw, especially among young people? How did they organize, or what was the aftermath of it, and how do you measure that in your impact framework?
Do we have one last question, or do we go to? Yes, thank you.
Maybe for Khalil, you mentioned this user needs model, which is really interesting. Do you have a few examples of how newsrooms, especially investigative ones, more traditional ones, could give tools to their readers to do something? Because in some cases, stories about like international supply chains, corruption, it's very far from what a citizen can do. Even if in some countries he writes to his MP, it won't change anything. So how do you bridge that gap in these places where a voice of a citizen is not worth enough?
You want to start, Ivor? Yes.
I think Paul said it beautifully when he used the term hoarders. I think even at Food for Mzansi, we've become hoarders of data, and we are only now beginning to take the first steps in making sense of all that data that we've collected over the years, over the last 9 years. We were shocked this year to discover how much we know about our audience just through data we collected. Names, cell phone numbers, academic qualification, income levels, you name it. We're a tiny team. I think we're about 15 in total, and that doesn't include a data scientist. Unfortunately, I think that's the next step that we have to venture on. But having said that, we're now working with MDIF exactly to answer your question, to help us make sense of all the data points that we've collected, and hopefully that will lead us to do better business, but also to serve our audience a lot better. So maybe if you ask me in a year, I'll have something more solid. We're also just learning.
I can answer. Thank you for the question. First, after this specific documentary, there were massive protests in the capital and also in Tetovo, the place where the hospital burned. Another thing is that when we first started, institutions, they basically ignored all sorts of investigative journalists and journalists in general. But now they're so afraid of us, but not really afraid of us. They're afraid by the support that we get from the public. Now, they have to respond to each investigation we do. So currently, around 80 people are on trial because of our investigations. Another thing that happened with the calls for action, because people realize that they have strength and that they can, for example, till now, most of them didn't know that they can write to members of parliament, that they have an email where they can write this. And now they're writing to them constantly about other issues. Also, we just don't leave the call for actions like that. For example, if the members of parliament don't respond, we start calling them. Did you saw the emails? Did you respond? We even found out one member said that he didn't know we had a call for action because he hadn't opened his email from parliament for more than 20 years. So it was crazy, and we published all of this, and we keep on nagging them until they have to do something about it. And the audience also, they joined this. They joined the fight, and basically our slogan since day one is join the fight, let's destroy corruption before it destroys Macedonia. Meaning, we're already fighting because this is our job. Do you want to join us, or will you stay silent and just be unhappy about everything that's going on? So they want to join.
And just to your question, I don't have the answer. I do not have the answer. But what I would say is let's chat afterwards, because the Bureau of Investigative Journalism based in London in the UK actually use a user needs model. And maybe that's a good point to just say that the user needs model that I showed you is sort of the default one. Newsrooms adapt it for their own purposes. So the Bureau, and it's an investigative journalism outlet, so exposes abuse of power. That's one need. Help people discover and learn about complex topics, typically what they're covering. Involve people by being transparent about the journalistic process. Spark people into realizing that good journalism can do by showing the real-world impact of their work. Those are the 4 needs that they have. They are working on a 5th one, which is how to help people take action. So I'm very happy to put you in touch with them, and you can continue that conversation.
And I actually have part of the answer. And we have since 2017 a program called the Global Anti-Corruption Consortium, where we publish investigative reporting that's passed onto the activists, and the activists trigger action. So the idea is to push impact as much as possible. We audited that program, and it increased the efficiency of our investigative reporting close to 5 times. So that's about working actively, with people, with advocates, with activists who can file complaints, who can get out there, shout, and all that. And that achieves, a lot more impact. Even in places where activism is not possible, because you can attack those, usually the corrupt, from abroad, because that's where they stash their fortunes anyway.
And I think it's a good way to end. I also wanted to share one insight to that question, is that we've been interviewing a lot of youth in the Pulitzer Center. Is one of the key audiences we wanted to work. And many of their answers in the why they weren't consumption news, again, this fragmented reality, this amount of news that is disturbing to them. But we got a lot of answers that talked about disconnection. They felt disconnected. They felt they didn't have a purpose. So we understood that there is a role to be played there that is about purpose, that it's about providing purpose. So sometimes it's not an actionable thing that we can measure. It's not a policy change, but it's providing purpose to a very disconnected society, because we are ultra-informed and at the same time very disconnected. It's the both sides of our society. I really wanted to thank you, this amazing, very inspiring panel, and the IPI for the invitation, and thank you all for being here.